Today on Faith on Tap, we're talking about turning points. That moment in life when you switch directions and face those truths that set you on a new course. We can find countless examples of turning points straight from the Bible.
There's our boy Abraham, who got a covenant. It was a turning point in his life when he was told he was going to have a descendant from his own lineage. You got David, who became king as a boy. That was a turning point in his life that set in motion a whole bunch of things. Moses at the burning bush, Jesus at his baptism, Paul at his road to Damascus. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. You can come up with turning point after turning point.
With history, the Bible, and popular media brimming with moments of transformation, how do people today approach and make sense of turning points in their own lives?
Yeah, I think there's a certain shallowness that doesn't prompt people for introspection. And I'm not talking about just constantly navel-gazing and being in your own head, but there are times where you have to just take stock of life and go, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What's going on here?
Answers and thoughts on these questions and so much more today on Faith on Tap. We are at Witch Doctor Brewery in Southington, Connecticut. We're listening to some emo band. I don't know who that is, but hopefully you can't hear on the recording. But we are.
I'm banging my head though.
Lion K, something like that.
So drink-wise, I'm having, unfortunately, a Slaymaker, which is a chocolate peppermint stout. If you put that in your head, thinks how it would taste, like, ugh, yeah, that's how it tastes. Not good. Liz, you went with this fancy name was called what?
Cider. It's actually very good. Generic, but still good.
What was the flavor?
Again, the name was cider.
Apple, I guess.
Cider.
Apple, I guess.
What was it flavored with, Liz?
Apple and goodness.
And cider.
So is cider, you're saying?
Yes.
And what was your IPA choice this time, Dennis?
This week was a New England IPA. And it was called Space Sheep. Pretty good. It's a lighter IPA, kind of crisp, cold, so it's good.
So you give it a thumbs up, a scale of 1 to 10?
1 to 10, I'd give it about a 7.3.
And yeah, my star, I'd give a 2.
Yeah.
And your cider, you'd give?
Solid 7.
And what was in your cider again?
Cider.
Okay, just making sure.
Spelled with a S.
Yeah.
Spelled with a spider without the P.
So we are going to be asking the question tonight. Dennis, you want to read the question?
The question tonight is, what moment in your life would you describe as a turning point?
So how do you think people will approach that, Liz?
I think they're going to go with like big life events, when they got married, when they met their first love, or when they lost their first love, something like that.
Basically,
Children.
relationships.
Yeah.
Then relationship oriented.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think children might make the list.
Yeah, or going to college, getting a job, things like that.
Dennis?
Yeah, I think the same. I think this was, I'm wondering, and I was thinking this on the way here, if anyone's going to say, I don't have a turning point, or I don't know of any turning point, which would be,
Really sad.
well, either sad or we met Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking people are going to come up with multiple turning points because you can look at relationships, you can look at spiritual life. There's a lot of different turning points.
Yeah, I think once you start thinking about turning points, then all of a sudden everything looks like a turning point.
Right, but you could have several pivotal ones, not just one.
Right, but I have a feeling people are going to start, oh yeah, but then this, and then this, and then, then their whole story becomes nothing but switchbacks.
And our job tonight is to go a little bit deeper in what's causing them to make that their turning point. So,
Do you think there'll be a Jesus turning point at all?
I'm looking at the crowd.
I'm looking at the puppy.
I'm looking at the puppy, and well,
He might know Jesus.
Yeah.
Dogs for Christ.
Dog
I'm
spelled
going to be
backward
optimistic
is
and
God.
say we'll get something positive from this.
I believe so. I think we've constantly undersold the people we talk to, and I say for the most part, they've been absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Well,
Agreed.
Let's give it a shot. Let's go.
Hello, what's your name?
Anthony.
Hi, Anthony. I'm Liz, and so I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's weird to answer the question. What would you consider a turning point in your life?
maybe when I got my first job after college.
Okay, great. So you went to, where did you go?
University of Connecticut.
Oh, okay. So you're a local.
Yeah. Local,
And
yeah.
awesome. And you went for what degree?
Computer science.
Okay. And this turning point, tell me about it.
Well, it's just a big change going from the college scene to like being a real adult, I guess.
Did you move out and get your own place and all the?
Yeah. Just all the jazz. Yeah.
Okay. So you're, did you get a master's, the bachelor's?
Just bachelor's.
Bachelor's. So there you are, 22.
Mm-hmm.
Did you live near your family or were you just kind of?
Everyone's local.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
good though. That's
Yeah.
at least you have that safety net. Because if you really, it's like
Oh,
my
yeah,
son
jump across
did the
country.
same thing,
Yeah.
and he was in South Carolina,
Mhm.
which is a much more frightening aspect in a lot of ways, but also a lot freeing
Yeah.
in ways as well. Tell me more about why this was a turning point. Who were you before, and who were you after?
I mean, I don't know. I just went from being like a normal college kid to an adult with a full-time job.
What were some of the biggest changes or surprises when you made that change?
Consistently having to like wake up every morning and you know be at work at 8 o'clock. You know,
Yeah,
staying
absolutely.
for a whole day, working with like all these other experienced people who. You know,
Were you like the youngest person there?
Yeah.
So what future turning points do you hope to see?
I mean, right now I'm just vibing, just cruising.
That's cool.
So,
But do you hope, are there some that you say, you know what? In
sure,
5
I
years,
wanna buy a
10
house,
years?
5 years of like a house. Yeah.
Very nice. That, and how would that be a big turning point for you? How would that change from who you are now and who you would be then?
Probably turn me into more of a responsible person, maybe.
Instead of just vibing out here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I
Of
appreciate
course.
it. Thank you.
What's your first name?
David.
Can you give me a moment in your life where a situation occurred, was like a turning point in your life that you remember?
2003, living in the jungles of Papua New Guinea.
This sounds awesome.
Went there to build a house for a young missionary couple that were members of my church. Had a business in Destin, Florida. Was used to the toys. Was used to the nice things.
Really?
And then you live amongst the natives and you realize that we have more things in this country than we actually need.
100%. Yeah.
When I came home, I was different. Not just myself, but the guys that I was with, we were all different.
Different in your spiritual walk or different
in our spiritual walk. Different in that we realized we don't need everything that we have. The things that we have, we take for granted. And when you go without for the 2 months that we were there, simple thing like we woke up one morning. We woke up every morning literally to the crow of the rooster, which is about anywhere between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And we had some of the best coffee that we've ever tasted in our lives.
Really?
That came from a plantation that was an hour from where we were at.
Wow. That
And it
sounds
was fresh. So much so that we all found a way to get some back to the States just so that we could have it when we got home.
Nice.
But we wanted French toast one morning. And we're like, we don't have any maple syrup. And everything's over an open pit. So open flame pit.
Yeah.
Or open pit flames. And I can remember as a kid, my grandmother taking sugar and water and stirring the heck out of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I said, well, let's try that.
Yeah.
We got sugar and we have water and we have fire. So we did that. And it was the best maple syrup I think we ever tasted. We were all overjoyed.
Yeah.
Just simple thing as French toast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I came back. We all came back, and we were different. It was the money. The money was. It was still important because it allowed us to pay our rents and our
Sure.
mortgages and our bills and all that stuff. But
Didn't dictate your life.
it didn't dictate our lives anymore.
So I'm sitting here with who you are,
Mariah,
Mariah. And how old are you, Mariah?
23.
23. So you're a youngin' too. So the question I have for you is, what moment in your life would you describe as a turning point?
A turning point. I would say I've experienced a few turning points in my life, but the most recent one I can think of is when I met my now fiance. At the time, he was just someone that I went to school with, but one thing led to another, and here we are.
And why was that a turning point?
Well, I was deep in the college lifestyle, just doing a lot of things that, a lot of college kids do. But it was probably about time for me to grow up. And my fiance was actually in another relationship, but we kind of became friends because we lived on the same floor in college. And it was my birthday, and I was quite off my rocker, you could say.
Off your rocker.
Off my rocker. And he looked at me and he was like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you not holding yourself to higher standards?" And that was a bit of an eye-opening moment for me. So I would say since then, I feel like I instantly matured in that moment, and I lead a much different life now than I did then.
So he called you out.
He did.
And you took that calling out well.
I did. I also I'm not gonna lie, I really liked him.
Oh.
So I took what he had to say seriously, and obviously worked in my favor.
And so you weren't dating him then?
No, he was dating someone else actually.
Oh, and he told you, like, why aren't you holding yourself to a better standard?
Well, yeah, because we were like, I would say, good friends at the time, and he was like, what are you doing? And just as like a good friend, and I,
like a good neighbor, State Farm was there.
Exactly.
And so was it a light switch moment where everything changed in that moment, or did it take time?
That's a good question. In some sense, I would say it was a light switch moment. And I think that was only because I did sort of like him. So I like took his opinion to heart. But I would say there were some things that took time to change as well. But it wasn't a long time. It was relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to a turning point in your life? So wait. So now you're engaged to this guy.
Yes.
And so obviously he approves of the changes that happened in your life.
Yeah, that actually wasn't quite an easy thing either, because he knew everything that was going on before. So getting like into a relationship and learning to trust one another, and like we knew the old worst parts of each other even. So, but I would say, now obviously I think he wants to marry me.
I hope so. If you're your fiance.
I hope so too.
It's a nice rock on your finger.
Yeah,
I will say.
thanks.
All right. Well, Mariah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Peace.
And hi, Liz.
Hi, Mark.
What's shaking?
Oh, my faith in humanity, but it's more of a slow, sad wobble.
And this is off the cuff, by the way. And
Dennis, what's shaking?
A couple chins and a cheek.
Dennis from now on will be known as the Rogue of Renewal.
I like the word rogue.
Yeah,
I will
like that.
I will accept that one. The Rogue of Renewal.
All right. The question we had, what moment in your life would you describe as your turning point? We asked the questions, various different ways. That was the gist of it. I think we had some interesting responses for sure. We got some spiritual responses. We got relational responses. And I was rather pleased. I guess we could start off talking about that. You talked to Mariah, I believe, right?
Yeah. Mariah, 23, 24-year-old. Her fiance, who wasn't her fiance at the time, I guess it was her birthday, and she was stoned and drunk, and he just looked at her. They were friends and said, what are you doing with your life? And it was a wake-up call for her. According to her, she did a 180 and cleaned things up, and now she's engaged to the same guy who told her years ago, like, what are you doing with your life? But, it was a good conversation, and she was young, and I was grateful to hear something. But what surprised me more was the lack of answers. I walked up to a table with 20-somethings. There were 4 of them, and they could not think of a single turning point in their life. And I think either, maybe because they're too young, they're only 20-something, But I thought, are they living in perfection? Or are they just living boring?
I resort to most people are boring. So I really do believe that. Perhaps they're just comfortable being what they are and they don't want to change. We also talked with Anthony, or Liz talked with Anthony.
He had some visions on what had been important in his life. He was young and he was very nervous. We did talk a while about introversion. I think it was very strong of him to share. So, but his big changes were, going directly from college to a job where he was the youngest guy, trying to figure out the ropes. And a lot of people have had that experience. And not everyone has a supportive work environment. So it seems like he did. And then I asked, what's next on your horizon? And so he is looking for moving on with getting a house and a family. And shortly after that, his girlfriend showed up. But so the conversation ended shortly after that. But he was definitely working really hard to try to give me some good answers. So I appreciated that.
Yeah. I didn't have to work that hard when I talked to David.
No, he opened up.
He really enjoyed the conversation, and he had a real interesting story where he was on a missions trip, 2003, to Papua New Guinea. They were building a house for one of the mission leaders, and his whole experience was just eye-opening for him and life-changing. Things from the coffee was just so good to, and these people had nothing. They were happy. He looked at all his material possessions, kind of realized that his whole perspective just changed from there. His spiritual walk was affected. He saw these toys are just stupid. He just appreciated the simple things of the roosters waking him up. And this was a long time ago.
3 and 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, you'd be fine with that. I'd be like, oh.
I've been up already for an hour.
Rooster stew sounds great right about it.
Fried rooster.
To me, it seems also that he was looking for a new purpose. So he was looking for another turning point in his life. He was trying to reinvent himself. And truth be told, he had a lot of talent, a lot of skills. So I really have been praying that he finds a new direction for himself because he has a lot of life to give.
Yeah. And Dave, if you're listening to this, you still have my number. Call me.
Yeah.
We'll get you to church.
The turning point question is pretty interesting. I was thinking of turning points in famous people in the Bible, movies, and I came across a couple, and you guys can interject as you will. For the famous people, well, there's Michael Jordan, first of all. I kind of knew it, but I guess I didn't. But when he was a sophomore in high school, he tried out for the varsity team and did not make it. He took that negativity and turned that failure into motivation. He practiced like crazy. You've heard of Michael Jordan before, right?
Yeah.
He's a pretty good basketball player and a baseball player, too.
For 4 minutes.
He really was able to take that adversity and make something positive. J.K. Rowling was another example. Apparently, she was on a train and there was a big delay. At that point, she took the time to write a book. What was it called? Oh, Harry Potter?
Oh,
yeah.
right.
Yeah. It was an inspirational transformation to her. She was a struggling single mother at that point, and she's not struggling anymore.
Ooh, I think she's billionaire status.
Yeah. My science geekness came in, and I thought of my man Archimedes. And
my man.
Yeah. Well, the story where I always told the students is true is that he was the kingdom's scientist, and the king got his gold crown, or allegedly gold, and he went to Archimedes and said, verify this is gold. And he'd go, well, it's difficult for the shape how to figure out it's true gold. So he was just pondering, and he was drawing himself a bath. As he was going down in the water, he noticed the water level rising. He felt himself getting lighter, and without getting too geeky, he understood the concept of buoyancy at a higher level. He ran out of the tub without putting clothes on, out the streets, and shouted,
Eureka!
There we go. Eureka, which
That's where it came from?
I found it. Yeah.
I found it, yep.
Yeah. That was his turning point moment. Now, I'm not good with movies, but there's a few movies that stick out for me. Number one is It's a Wonderful Life. I think the turning point would be, probably a couple turning points, but the big one was when he was given a chance to see what life would be without him. That was a major turning point in his life where he didn't care if he was going to prison. Nothing mattered anymore because he realized his value of his life. I thought that was pretty neat. The Matrix.
What one?
The real one.
The only one. Stop over there.
Yeah. He was given a choice, the red pill or the blue pill.
Yep.
And he chose the red pill. He wanted to see the reality of life. And that was definitely a turning point.
We just saw a terrible M. Night Shyamalan movie.
What one?
I'm not going to say its name because it was so bad.
You're going to be talking about The Sixth Sense, though.
But he started his career out with an outstanding movie that I can't believe anyone hasn't seen, which is Sixth Sense. And so the main character played by Bruce Willis, his turning...
Malcolm?
Is it Malcolm?
Yeah.
Oh, do you have that written down there?
No. No.
His turning point came very close to the end of the movie when the little boy, whose name
Cole?
is Cole...
You don't know these things?
Wow.
Wow.
It's been a minute. When Cole says, I see dead people, and then you see Malcolm's face kind of change as he's all of a sudden going through all these things that have gone through his experience with Cole. And the thing is, it happens to the viewer at the exact same time it happens to Malcolm. Took me a few extra minutes to figure out what's going on, but normal people got it quickly when he realizes, and if you haven't seen the movie, you can stop listening for the next 15 seconds. He realizes that he's been dead all along, and Cole has been talking to him as one of these other ghosts.
I love that book.
It's such a great movie. So, yes.
Now, if there's only characters in the Bible that went through any turning points, Dennis, do you happen to have any?
You know, there might be a few. There's our boy Abraham, who got a covenant. It was a turning point in his life when he was told he was going to have a descendant from his own lineage. That, you know, you got David, who became king as a boy. There was a turning point in his life that set in motion a whole bunch of things. Moses at the burning bush, Jesus at his baptism, Paul at his road to Damascus. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. You can come up with turning point after turning point.
Yeah, and which makes it for great storytelling too. It really is. Yeah, when you watch The Chosen, it comes to life. When I was preparing for this, I'm thinking of my turning points, and I'm sure you have your turning points. You're noticing your frustration when you're talking to people, and I really don't have anything. And I was reflecting. Do you think that is because, as a society, we're just content? We're fat, lazy, sitting back, playing video games, watching sports, is going to do my job, and not even searching for anything deeper.
I think there's a lot to that when talking about all these movies. If you live vicariously through media and you see everyone else's turning points, you don't even bother getting your own. You just live this life of watching everyone else do it.
While you remain safe in your house.
Feel good, shed a tear.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, so you can talk about all these other turning points without ever actually living through it yourself, and that's desperately sad.
Yeah, I think there's a certain shallowness that doesn't prompt people for introspection. And I'm not talking about just constantly navel gazing and being in your own head, but there are times where you have to just take stock of life and go, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What's going on here? Maybe that is a older generation thing where, wisdom comes in somewhat.
Well, I don't know, but let me ask you, because as a pastor, and before you started doing this whole brewery thing with us, I think admittedly you're kind of cloistered. You just knew people in your church. That being said, anyone who's going to be going to church is looking or has gone through a turning point, forced to go to church.
I think yes, but it might be even more subtle than that they are venturing into. That might not be the turning point, but it's the beginning of a turning point because they're searching for something.
Well, the point is they're actually taking the initiative at some level, where when we go to the breweries, we're finding some people have no such initiative to do that.
No.
And it's like,
it's kind of...
I think a lot of them have been raised like very, very protected and not allowed to have anything bad happen to them. And I think that's a modern problem. Parents don't allow their children to feel anything negative. It's like,
yeah.
And I think that's true. And I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying. And at the same time, I'm thinking, however, in order for you to have a turning point, you going to have to want something. There's got to be something that you're discontented with, unless something just falls on your lap and it becomes if someone like is sick in your family and it changes you. Obviously, you didn't ask for it; it came upon you. In most spiritual journeys, I think you're not just sitting back playing a video game, eating Cheetos, and all of a sudden Jesus comes into your life.
It's happened.
Yeah. The energy output has to be there.
There has to be a brokenness that comes upon you in some way, shape, or form to kind of be the impetus of something turning around. I agree with that, yeah.
And for me, I know probably for Liz too, the turning points were not necessarily just one single event, and there it is, right there. I can pinpoint it right there, where it's usually, for me anyways, it's like a turning of a barge. These things are starting to happen, and it's a slow process. For me, my Christian journey really became when I was in high school, and I saw my sisters. I was inquisitive. I did reading. et cetera, et cetera. But it was a process. And to get to the spiritual giant that I am now, that you reverend, you asked me for basically sermon ideas.
Bask in your light.
Yeah, it could be off my head. I don't know, but my career, I was a teacher for 30-something years, and it wasn't one day I was this and then became a teacher. It was like a lot of bad circumstances happened in my life that forced me into teaching.
I feel the same way about being a pastor.
Yeah, but it probably true too. I mean, it wasn't like one day you woke up and I'm going to be a pastor.
It's true. I think I had a light switch turning point, and that was my conversion to Christianity. That changed me from a hard drinking, drug doing young man into somebody who's seeking something.
Was that instantaneous?
Yeah, pretty much. That moment was instantaneous. But then, as you say, most turning points for me are the barge turn, the slow, calculated, disciplined, deliberate change that you make in life.
Do you have a turning point, Liz?
I became a Christian when I was 11 or 12. So that I didn't have the more dramatic ones that you two have had.
Mine wasn't.
No, yours was a little more dramatic.
A little bit, yeah.
Mine was, I was in high school.
Well,
and
I
did some
kind of
reading.
I grew up in the Baptist church tradition, and just and the journey hasn't go from 12 to not 12
in a matter of 3 years.
It's been a lifelong turning point, I suppose. But I feel like my life is actually a lot of switchbacks. If you're not familiar with that is out there, it's when you're climbing a really steep mountain or hill or whatever you want to call it, the path will keep switching back and forth to make the travel up easier rather than going as vertical. You're going as horizontal as possible. So you have to keep switching back from one direction to another. And that's what I feel like my life has been, just a lot of switchbacks. Nothing is terribly dramatic in and of itself. I mean, I've had some beautiful ones, getting married, having children, but they're traditional.
Nothing's wrong with that.
No,
they're
but they're all a bunch of
reason.
little switchbacks rather than,
But you're still climbing up.
Still climbing up. Yep. And that's, from 12 on.
I think that's the next thing I wanted to point at. The concept of when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's like one of those things with your turning point. I think more or less it's a time where you're ready for something, then you are seeing the situation. Or in a Christian perspective, you've been praying for something and now you're open for God. God was there all the time. Now you're open to hear God. That was my thoughts. I think that a lot of the turning points is just a sign of maturity, whether it be maturity with relationships or spirituality, what have you.
I would agree with that. There is a maturing process. In saying that, you think of turning points with serial killers. There comes a point in time where they're so deranged that killing becomes easy, and there's that click. So there could be a turning point in the negative direction also.
The turning points are part of our existence, and it makes us better. And my fear is that I think a lot of people, younger people, are not even looking for a change. They're not ready for the teacher to appear. They're just happy, just getting along to get along. To me, it saddens me because it's the adversity. No one wants adversity, but boy, who can change dramatically without adversity in their life? It's just part of nature.
Well, I wish I knew if I made this up or I heard it, because I don't know. But it lends itself to a guitar. When you tune a guitar, and if you over-tune it, tighten those strings, put a lot of tension on those strings, it's sharp, and the string could be ready to pop. There's not enough tension on that string. The sound is flat, it's buzzy, it wiggles, it's not good for anything. But the correct amount of tension makes music. And, that's kind of where I find my life in. You're never going to get rid of contention, tension, frustration, but how you respond to it. Are you going to pop the string or just untune and sit out, or are you going to make music?
On that note, great discussion. Have a great day. Tune in next episode when you'll hear Dennis say,
I hope that Doge tithes to Oasis Church just once.
Hey, awesome listener. If you're enjoying our podcast, give us a little love, like, share, follow, and snag this episode for later. It's the easiest way to keep the good times rolling and make our day. You're the best. Thank you.